The Nightforce NX8 series of rifle scopes feature an 8x multiplier, meaning they're going to be in the 1 to 8 form, this 2.5 to 20, or the 4 to 32. When these first debuted, I'd only gotten my hands on a few 1 to 8s that were very good. Unfortunately, the majority of them were kind of turds, so I had a little bit of a hesitance with thinking that this might be very good. However, if a company is going to do something good, it's probably going to be Nightforce. This is indeed my second time with a Nightforce product, the first being the 4 to 14 SHV, which I'd reviewed many years ago. It was a very well built and finished rifle scope, and it produced a very good image, but the field of view was very small, as was the view looking through it, and that made it lag behind a little bit on the PST Gen 2 3 to 15 that I was reviewing side by side with it. I had been hearing a lot of great things about this particular rifle scope, the 2.5 to 20, but I was still slightly skeptical. But thankfully, an anon on Reddit, when I commented on one of his posts featuring one of these rifle scopes, he reached out to me and offered it for me to review. Unfortunately, however, he did not have the original packaging for it, so there is no true unboxing. However, let's take a quick look at its overall fit, finish, and features before we go any further with this. Instead of shipping it in the original packaging, the owner decided to be a little bit more bolder than that. He bought online a Pelican Volt case, threw the scope inside, and then threw the case back inside the cardboard box that it came in to not raise any suspicion. I do have to respect someone that's willing enough to spend that much money to protect their investment. The NX8 comes in two different flavors, black or this quite lovely FDE. It's a really nice mix between a Psi and a Gen 2 Razor HD. It just sort of flows. It's really nice color, and I appreciate Nightforce for giving us something of a little variety if we so choose. Unlike other manufacturers, you get the choice of black or this FDE, which is really nice. Another nice thing that Nightforce offers are reticle options. There are 7 in total, 5 featured with the F1 platform and 2 in the standard version. And of course you have your choice of MOA or mil-radian. Let me show you what Nightforce claims about the NX8 series of rifle scopes, this one in particular. That little advert right there is actually 100% true. I've read a lot of stuff from a lot of different websites on a lot of different scopes, and this is the first time where it's actually seemed to be true. At 30 ounces, the weight of this thing is a little bit higher in the MPVO category. If you're looking for something lighter weight that has a similar-ish sort of magnification range as well as feature set, something like the Vortex LHT is a really clear winner here because it's nearly 9 ounces lighter. However, it doesn't have the overall sort of tactical feel of the NX8. The only reason why I'm showcasing the PST Gen 1 2.5 to 10 is not because that it's 10 ounces lighter, but it's got half the magnification potential as the NX8. So it is much lighter, but the NX8 has so much more capabilities. The NX8 also features a ton of great features, with the exception of one, but we'll get there soon. This thing has a standard locking eyepiece. No fast focus eyepieces to be found on most Nightforce products, and I love it. I don't understand the whole necessity to have a fast focus eyepiece on every optic. You should set the reticle to your eye, which is what the rear eyepiece does. You set it to your eye so the reticle is perfectly sharp to your eye, and you lock it and you leave it alone, and it's done forever. It's beautiful. Leave it alone. Fantastic to see. Another nice thing are the Tenebrex caps, which are, of course, amazing. Another really nice thing is that little cattail on the magnification ring. This thing does have a standard 180-degree throw, which is perfectly fine, and that cattail makes adjusting it a breeze. Also, all the controls in this thing are, as near as makes no difference, perfect. Everything is smooth, there's no hiccups, there's no hard spots, it's perfectly damped everywhere. The illumination is controlled via push button. Now, I am not the biggest fan of push button illuminations, but at least with this, the button actuation is very nice and responsive. You actually know that you're pushing a button and it makes contact and then it changes. So when you do adjust the brightness on this thing, it's very easy to know that you're actually doing something as opposed to just pushing a button and hoping that something happens. The red and green illuminated reticle on this thing is powered by a single standard CR2032 battery, which is housing a very discreet cap under the regular parallax knob. Just turn it to one extreme or the other to hit the hard stop and then open or close the compartment. As far as the turrets go, the windage turret is capped, which is lovely to see. With a drop reticle like this, you shouldn't really need to adjust it all that much, and if you have to, you unscrew a cap. It would be nice if it was locking, but unfortunately, not even the elevation turret is locking on this thing, and that is the only thing I would like to see changed. There's no reason not to have a locking elevation or windage turret on every scope from any particular manufacturer. If even the cheapest scope manufacturers are capable of producing a quality lock, then why the hell can't Nightforce? However, the elevation turret on this thing is quite exceptional. So let's take a closer look at that right now. Even though there's a tiny little bit of play in the detent, the turret sounds and feels truly fantastic. I removed the Tenebrix caps for the rest of the video, so what you're going to be seeing is what you'd normally see through the scope without any caps or other coverings on it. The amount of scope body that we see is really not bad given the fact there's an 8x multiplier. The view through it is also pretty good. One thing I will say about the Mil XT reticle here at 2.5x is it is really fine. The cross posts at 3 and 9 o'clock are a decent sized thickness, but the drops going all the way down at 6 o'clock are basically invisible until about 4 or 5x, and that's going to be a point of contention throughout the rest of this video. As I increase the magnification on this first focal plane scope to its maximum here at 20, the Mil XT reticle really comes into its own. It gives a lot of information, but doesn't seem cluttered or hard to read whatsoever. That fine center dot is great for precision work, and you don't have to do any sort of guessing as far as where the drops are because they're very clearly labeled, all the way down to like 60 something mils at 2.5x. The illumination is more than bright enough to pick up here, and in most cases, unless you're out in a really bright sunny environment where it's just not going to cut the mustard. If you want to change it between green and red, press and hold the power button to change it into green. You can see right there it flashes to indicate that it's on green and at the maximum brightness. The reticle will blink when you get to either extremes, but with the green and the red respectively, when you get it down to its minimum brightness, it's so dim in most cases you won't see it unless you're in a dark room, so be mindful of that. How will this function under night vision? I cannot attest nor even make the attempt. But just know that the illumination is clear, crisp, and sharp with zero bleed and gets more than bright enough for most people's uses of a reticle such as this. Having a great reticle and great turrets are nothing if the thing doesn't track properly. So let's give this a real quick mini box test and then increase it to 10 full mils of elevation to see if we see any sort of abnormalities. The illumination down here is truly excellent. But with that, let's go 4 to 4 to the left and then completely up 10 mils. So far as we're cresting over the 4x4 mini box, you will see it lines up perfectly. Also take note that the reticle lines up perfectly to my target. It might be a little bit off on the windage, but only about a half of a click, which really isn't anything. The true test is going to come when we get all the way down to 10 mils, and once we crest that, you'll see it is a perfect performance. I confirm that it's actually climbing properly by resetting it to 0, checking any sort of backlash, to which there is none, and then I reset it back down to 10 mils. Truth be told, this is one of the best, if not the best performance of a tracking test that I've ever recorded. So, kudos to you, Nightforce. I'm very happy to see that so far this $2,300 rifle scope is holding its own as far as its feature set, build quality, and its performance with the tracking test. But there's one last thing to really know, and that is the image quality any good? Is this thing even usable with its Eyebox? Well, let's get cracking with it and find out. Here at 2.5x, we're going to be focusing really quickly on this 30-yard power transformer. For a lot of rimfire shooters, this is an interesting test because a lot of people shoot really close distances. I know for a lot of people that shoot well and beyond that, it really doesn't make a difference, but the ability to focus down this close and have a beautiful, usable image is quite important. And I'm so far delighted to say that with a little bit of fine tuning from the side focus, which does seem a little bit touchy in these closer distances, is capable of producing a very wonderful looking image. But there's one thing that we have to talk about with this MIL-XT reticle. Now, I can't vouch for any of the other reticles because I personally haven't gotten behind any of them, but this reticle is not suited to go down to 2.5x. The only way that you could use this rifle scope at 2.5x is just for scanning the horizons, which you should be using with binoculars or just your bare vision. The reticle becomes way too fine on the center section, which is the most important because you can't really pick up where the center is. For some of you hotshots out there, you might go, oh, I know exactly where the center is all the time. I don't even need to look. It's total bullshit. It's really hard to pick this reticle up below 5x. Maybe 4x you can get away with a little bit. Maybe if you're on a square range, but if you're in an environment such as this with a lot of stuff going on, the reticle becomes almost useless. As for almost useless, the illumination on full here, you can just see when I cap the front objective with my hands. You can see there it's a little shade of red. I'm pressing the button with my left hand. I capped it with my right, and I thought maybe it wasn't at the highest setting, but it was. I cycle through it, it goes to dark, I turn it to green, and you can't even see it. So again, like I said, the illumination isn't great for environments like this, which is quite bright. But keep in mind, we're also at 2.5x, where we could barely see the reticle to begin with. So with leaving the illumination on red and on full, let's slowly increase the magnification to see if we can pick it up when we get to its maximum of 20. We are cresting up and close to about 5x right here, which again is where this reticle really starts to be noticeable. And it makes more sense to have this reticle on a 5 to 25, let's say, because then at its minimum, you'll at least be able to see a lot of the drops, whereas here at 2.5, you really can't see much. Here at 20x, the illumination is just noticeable. It's just enough to not have a black reticle on our red bricks, which is actually worse than having a black reticle on these red bricks, but at least you can see that there's a slight bit of tint to it, which is great. As far as the image quality here, the day was a little bit hazy, so we are going to have a little bit more of diffused lighting and everything's going to seem a little bit washed out as opposed to crystal clear, bright, sunny days with green, bright trees, but we make do with what we've got. So far, the resolution seems to be very high. We have a nice, sharp-looking image with good color representation. Every time that I got behind this thing, it seemed true natural colors coming through as opposed to over-exaggerated in one realm or the other. As far as the light transmission, it basically seemed as bright outside as it was looking through the scope, if not maybe even a little bit more. Light transmission wasn't a problem even in the darker environments, which we'll be checking out momentarily. But before we get there, I want to put the side focus, which is claimed to be 11 yards, to the test. So we're going to pan down to this budding tree that's just outside my window, probably well within that 11-yard range at maximum. In fact, I think it's even a little bit closer. And I'm going to just tweak the side focus to see if we can get these little budding parts of this cherry blossom tree to come into any sort of focus. Keep in mind, we're still at 20x. The illumination's still on full. That slight pulsing is probably just for my camera settings. But here we are looking at this budding cherry blossom tree at 20x at about 11 yards, and we have a gorgeous, gorgeous looking image. Because this is an 8x multiplied scope, from the very get-go I was worried about one thing, and that was going to be the eye relief and or the exit pupil, or just a combination of the two. How usable is this thing really going to be in the higher magnification ranges? Well, considering this is borderline HPVO or high-powered variable optic territory being a 20x up top, I figured that if you're going to be using this magnification, you're going to be in a really steady position with a good cheek weld, so it doesn't matter that much. And we've already proven that going from 2.5 to 20x does not shift our positioning on the scope. It's perfectly fine, which is really important. At 20x though, it does have a pretty tight exit pupil. It's small, which means that once you try to go off center to adjust your eye side to side, or if you're in a bad position, it's kind of hard to look through it. This being a 20x, even if it was a 6x multiplier or a 5x multiplier, you can't expect much more than what this thing is capable of producing. However, It is capable of producing a very beautiful image that doesn't really show any signs of weakness other than something that we'd see across any other optic. If you're going to be using this thing on 20x, expect to be in a really tight, well situated position, a bipod and rear bag sort of situation to actually be able to use it. We bring it back to 16x to see if it gets any better, and it does get marginally better. So, this trend is already looking up. If we continue on the downward trend towards magnification being towards its minimum, and it continues to get better and better, then at least then we have a somewhat normalized performance, which means that you can use it in lower magnifications easier than you can the higher ones. I'll just tell you right now, that is the case, and it's honestly quite good. I never had the experience behind this thing where I'm like, I really wish this thing had a larger eyebox, or I wish the exit pupil was bigger, or I wish I didn't have to change the position of my head. There was none of that. It performed exactly as to be expected, which is really, really good. There are better performing optics, but they cost significantly more than this. At $2,000, it performs at least as good as what this thing costs. So if you're looking for something that's bang for the buck, so far this scope seems to be it. Let's now get behind the scope in a little bit more of a dynamic environment to show you what I'm talking about. At 2.5x, you can see that if you're off a little bit, it will creep in with a little bit of shadows, but the view looking through it is still clear. One thing I didn't talk about earlier with looking at the power tower at 900 yards is the reticle and the image stayed sharp well into the shadow area, which is great. One didn't fall apart before the other. So even if you're slightly off and you're looking through it, you can still have a good view of it. Another nice thing was, once you get the parallax set to the right setting for the right distance, you don't have to worry about the reticle dancing on you against the target. I've seen this happen on a lot of scopes, even ones that are really expensive, where it just doesn't seem like they're set up properly for the parallax. I slowly increased the magnification towards its maximum, but we still have a very decent performance here at about 10x.
16x.
At 16x, it's going to get tighter. But this is about the cusp. This is where you will start to notice that it gets a lot tighter than the previous magnifications. But again, it's right in that area where we fully expect it to be. And 20x, like you'll see right now, is again what we'd expect it to be.
20x.
Tight. You have to have a really good cheek weld and a really stable position to use this scope appropriately at these sort of magnifications. But what an image you can get. It's time to compare this scope to some of its competitors, and this first one for some of you might be a bit of a head scratcher. It is the Athlon Helos BTR Gen 2 2-12. Why am I comparing a $2,000 scope to a sub $500 rifle scope? Well, it's my belief that both of these rifle scopes can be used for very similar things, for precision SBRs. Now, one of them is clearly an advantage winner as far as capacity goes with magnification and reticle options. That's the NX8. But don't discredit the Athlon. I truly feel that the Athlon has one of the best reticles for that sort of concept, that intermediate distance for just making hits. Some people really complain about the center dot in the Athlon being too big, but I beg to differ. I feel those people are missing the entire concept of running an MPVO like this, where you want to be able to use it at the minimum and max magnification. Look at the reticles here. You can very easily make out with that Athlon the center dot, the donut, and the post at 3, 6, and 9, as opposed to the MIL-XT on the Nightforce, where you can only see the post at 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, and you don't really notice what's in between. For me and my uses with an MPVO like this on an SBR, I wanted the ability to run it at the minimum magnification if I so choose and be capable of using the scope to its fullest potential. And that is from its minimum to maximum magnification. With the NX8 with this MIL-XT reticle, I don't believe it is the perfect combination. But reticle aside, the view through the NX8 is simply superb in every way, shape, and form. Looking through the Athlon offers a very large image, especially to its main competitors of the similar magnification range and price point. But the NX8 is much larger to look through, and that's going to be even more apparent when we compare this against some other optics very soon. But side by side between these two, yeah, there's definitely an advantage to both, I would say. Ultimately, the best overall package is going to be the NX8. The only thing it's missing over the Athlon is a locking elevation turret and a more usable practical reticle that you could use both minimum and maximum magnification on it. Beyond that, there's no real other comparison. But I bring this up because the Athlon also really doesn't perform half bad for its price point. I think it's actually a sleeper in the community. Next up on the comparison rosters could be another one of my favorite optics. This time it's the 3-18x50 Meopta Optica 6 featuring the MRAD1 reticle. Right off the bat you can easily see where the center is to the reticle on the Meopta. Again, this MRAD1 is one of the better options as far as a reticle that is usable both minimum and maximum to the magnification while still allowing you a very precise aiming point on the middle, a fine dot with a very fine crosshair. Now, it does get a little bit of criticism, the MRAD1 found in the Meopta, because around that crosshair, it seems a little bit sparse as far as precision holds as opposed to the Mil XT to the left, and I will be agreeing with a lot of people there. I do wish it had a little bit more hash marks in between. Going from 2.5 on the left to 3x on the right, you can clearly see that there is a magnification advantage here. That little extra half X goes a long way. You have a much larger field of view looking through the NX8 as well as a much larger view looking through the NX8. The Meopta always had a slightly smaller view looking through it, but that is just one way a manufacturer can keep the resolution and sharpness of an image higher is by making the view look a little bit smaller. Sometimes manufacturers sacrifice a larger view looking through it to have maybe not as sharp of an image. I'm talking about things like the PST Gen 2 3-15, where it's got a larger view looking through it as opposed to the Meopta, but the image never seemed as sharp or as clear or as vibrant with the colors. The Meopta wins in that department. Most of the time I'm willing to go one way or the other, but here it's a win to the NX8. It wins in every regard, but again, how much you willing to pay for that extra half X at the bottom and that extra 2X on the top? Both of these produce really good images, but the NX8 has a much larger view looking through it, and it does have some features that you might be looking for as opposed to something like the Meopta. But again, the Meopta is less than half the price of the NX8, so a definite competitor if you're looking to save some money. We're going to catch up with the comparisons again in just a little bit, but I wanted to touch on its 1,000-yard capacity. Here at 1,000 yards with 0 mils of added elevation, we have a good looking image. Again, the colors are a little bit washy because of just the overcast nature of the day. In fact, the few weeks that I had this thing, it was basically shitty almost every single day. I back out the magnification a little bit and add 10 mils of elevation. This is standard protocol for all of my testing of a scope that has a magnification greater than 10. Readjusting our 0 and then increasing the magnification back to full will yield to see if there's any sort of difference to the image. There is no difference to the image. At least on most rifle scopes you'll see something. It might get better, it might get worse. In most cases, it will get worse before it gets better. But here with 10 extra mils, it seems to be doing exactly the same. So I back out the magnification and I add an extra 10 mils of elevation. So we're at a total of 20x right now. Well, 20 mils, bringing it up to 20x, and the colors actually look a little bit better. It seems like the contrast is increased a little bit in the shadows. It seems like everything's a little bit easier to determine what is what. So at 20 plus mils of elevation at 20x at 1,000 yards, we're actually having a really good looking image. So why not max out the elevation turret for a current 0, which is zeroed out for a 22 LR at 50 yards. At a total of 28 mils of elevation, you can see now that the image does get a little bit darker, but that's because the exit pupil has shifted. So I adjust my camera accordingly, which is only about a 1/16 of an inch to clear it out, and the image still is what I would consider to be more than usable. It is definitely blurry, but guess what? All we have to do is play around with that side focus. Guess what? If something's wrong, try to fix something, change something. You never know what's going to happen. Adjusting the side focus cleared up the image and gives us very close performance to what we had at the beginning of this, which was 0 mils of added elevation here at 20x at 1,000 yards. This, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the best performances as far as elevation gain that I've ever come across. 28 mils of added elevation, and I can't really tell the difference between this and the original image. It is truly impressive. To show you what it looks like with bringing up the elevation turret back to 0, that is where we have to be to get there. 28 mils. Super, super impressive. Let's head back over to the rooftop real quick. You can see that it's clearly several days to weeks later because those trees have now started blossoming into beautiful cherry blossoms. The illumination here, green at maximum, is very nice. Press and hold the button and it will change to red. Once we get it into red, it will flash to indicate that it's there, and you can see that it is a little bit brighter than the green. But again, depending on your terrain or what color your eye picks up better, will determine what you're going to run. You might have noticed a little bit of haloing in the corner of the glass when the illumination was too bright. You're never really going to notice it because, again, you'd have to be in an environment like this or darker to be able to spot something like that from the illumination being too bright. Increasing the magnification all the way to its maximum of 20. Just pay attention to the colors and the brightness of the image. It stays exactly the same. This is witchcraft, I say. An 8x multiplied scope with a 2.5 to 20 that doesn't change brightness when you go from minimum to maximum. That still allows for enough brightness and contrast that we can almost count bricks on a very dark evening at 400 yards. This is blasphemy, I say. Now, you do see, again, a little bit of that flicker to the illumination. To the naked eye, you will not see that. It's just the refresh rating with my camera with the LED emitter in this reticle that allows you to see that. But to the naked eye, you will not see that. The green on this thing is the brightest green that I've seen on a reticle since the Swamp Fox Arrowhead 1 to 10 second focal plane. But that does not count because that was not a precision rifle scope such as this. This thing is still punching well above its weight class, in my opinion. Now let's finish off these comparisons with two last ones. This time it's going to be with the Vortex Razor HD Gen 2 3 to 18. Why the 3 to 18? Well, you can find these for a really cheap price, and they offer a very similar magnification range to the 2.5 to 20. Again, only a half x less on the bottom and 2x less on the top. Ultimately, it's really not that big of a difference, but there is one catastrophic difference between these two, and that is the weight. You're not going to be looking to build a lightweight build and even contemplate a Gen 2 Razor HD. But if you don't mind a little bit extra heft or girth, they are still some of the best rifle scopes to buy, especially in the used market. You can find really nice examples of these 3 to 18s for as low as $1,200 to $1,300. And for that price, you can't help but think about if it's going to be good for you. Now, there are different features between them. The Razor is definitely more of a tactical style scope. It's got locking elevation, locking windage, locking illumination. You name it, it's got it. It's got excellent feel, fit, finish. All the qualities are great. It's just really friggin' heavy. And that's going to be the real buzzkill here. If you don't mind extra weight or you're looking to mitigate recoil, something like the Gen 2 Razor HD will definitely help. If you don't think you need the extra 2x on the top or that extra half x on the bottom, then a Razor HD Gen 2 is a really good option, especially considering you can get a plethora of different reticles, both mil and MOA. You have really good glass, great sharp clear images, good contrast. You get the lot. Again, it's just the weight. But a side-by-side comparison of these two glass and image-wise, they're basically neck and neck with one another. You can't go wrong with either of them personally. My final comparison for all of you lovely ladies and gentlemen out there is probably going to be the most controversial. This is, of course, the Leupold Mark V HD 2 to 10. The Mark V HD 2 to 10 is a great scope in and of itself, but it has some flaws, or at least some things that we must take note of. The most noticeable one first is going to be actually the price. These are the same price more or less, with the exception of the Leupold doesn't have illumination as standard. That's a $500 option. So you're looking at about a $300 to $500 more expensive option going with the Leupold, even though you have half the magnification capacity on the top end as opposed to the NX8. Now, one would think, and myself included, that on paper these two scopes were designed to go head-to-head to one another. But just because both their lowest magnification settings start with a 2 doesn't mean that they're rivals at all. In fact, I don't think they could be any farther from one another. And this is where it becomes a little bit hazy, a little bit gray. You see, the Mark V HD is truly a grunt-style optic. It's raw, it's simple, it's as bare bones as one could possibly get, and that's by design. If you want to build an SBR, whether it's on an AR platform or another firearm, a bolt-action gas, it doesn't matter. The Leupold is going to be the option that's going to just be like, okay, it's going to be sent down to 2x, you're going to take some shots, you're going to be running with it, you're going to be moving with it, you're going to be clearing buildings with it, you're going to be running through the forest. The reticle is thick enough that you can pick it up well enough, even without illumination, which honestly I probably wouldn't even opt for illumination with the Leupold Mark V 2-10, simply because it just doesn't work all that well. It's not that bright. I think the Nightforce is a little bit brighter, all things considered, but the reticle is at least easier to pick up with the Mark V. But it's more than just that. It's just got a better overall sense and fit and finish of a direction. The capped windage, the locking elevation, just a side focus is all you really have to adjust. If you run a proper zero, you might only be holding inside of 200-300 yards and then dialing up from there if you so chose at farther distances. It just seems like you don't have to think about using it as much as opposed to with the NX8. The NX8 seems like if you want to build an SBR, but you're going to be focused a lot more on precision. You want that larger field of view. You want the nicer capacity as far as the illumination, the more intricate reticles, the nicer turrets, the perfect tracking. These two technically are capable of doing very similar things up until about 10x, which of course then the Nightforce just doubles itself. I mean, here we're looking at basically the exact same target at the exact same distance from the exact same position, but one is twice the size of the other. If you're focused more about precision, if you're focused more about pushing your limits and taking more exacting hits at distance, the Nightforce is for you. But if you want a more raw experience, if you want to just get the gun dirty, throw it around, run a really aggressive, let's say, two-gun match with, you might be better off with something like the Leupold, where maybe you don't want as much magnification capacity or you don't need it because a hit is a hit. If you're shooting at a mini IPSC or a full-size IPSC, a hit is a hit no matter where it is. But maybe you're shooting for groups and the NX8 is going to really pull ahead on that one. So these two are very similar, but yet very far apart. Both of them are, however, very, very good. And that is the perfect spot for me to segue into my final thoughts. The NX8 is a truly spectacular rifle scope. I do wish that they had a setup, or at least a reticle, even if it didn't have a locking elevation turret, just a reticle that would really take advantage of the full magnification range. I would love to run this thing at 2.5x and have a reticle that I know where the center is. I know where some drops are. I know where I have to hold. And then be able to crank it up to 20x like this and still have the usability and the precision capacity that this Mil XT currently offers. I don't think that any of the current offerings from Nightforce is capable of doing exactly what I'm looking for, but I'm hoping that might change in the future. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is my only thing that I would really like to see changed on this thing. That and maybe a locking turret on the elevation, but that's besides the point. I could honestly sacrifice not having that and having a slightly more practical reticle. Like I said earlier, this reticle doesn't really become a noticeable thing until about 4 to 5x. This is definitely set up much more for their NX8 4 to 32 or their 5 to 25 or 7 to 35 attacker. Yes, where you're going to have a much higher base magnification where the reticle is going to be much more visible as opposed to going down to 2.5x on this. But that's just a nitpick. I really hope that Nightforce changes that because it would be incredible to have a slightly more capable reticle that uses this whole entire magnification range that they gave us. They gave us this incredible magnification range that also just so happens to have an incredible image from minimum to maximum and a more than practical enough eyebox and exit pupil in a small, fairly lightweight, extremely well-made package. It's the only thing about this that I want to see changed. Very similar to with the Mark V HD. Yeah, the TMR reticle is usable just like our standard mil dot has been for the last, 40 plus years. But again, I would like to see something a little bit tweaked, just like what we have with the Athlon, with the Helos BTR Gen 2 to 12, or even with the Meopta Optica 6 3 to 18. I really do think those reticles are striking a better balance for the magnification range given. But I'm not going to have this section be another 20 minutes long. This rifle scope is truly fantastic. I have come across a couple of these used for sale, and even though I have absolutely no need for them, I've come so close to pulling the trigger because the experience that I've had getting behind this thing has been eye-opening. I never thought this would be as good as it was, and it's really, truly blown me away. To the Anon that has sent this in, thank you so much for giving me perspective on what some manufacturers are capable of doing and what the market is really going towards. If this is the future of optics, I am so excited to see what comes next. Because if this middle tier Nightforce is capable of producing such incredible images for honestly a fairly affordable price, $2,000 for a lot of people is a lot of money. But that's why in the beginning I brought in lower priced alternatives which perform really close to this, but at a fraction of the price, a third to sometimes a quarter of the price. But truly, this Nightforce performs better than I could have expected, and it's something that has truly opened my eyes. So, with that, again, a huge thank you to Anon for sending this in. This has been truly sensational, and one that I'm going to continue looking for and hope that Nightforce will offer a couple of different tweaks for this thing in the near future. So, with that, a huge thank you for all of you out there for watching. It's because of you that I still run this channel. My time frame has been so limited by my soon-to-be 7th-month-old that I don't even know what day it is anymore. It's crazy to keep up with everything. But I'm doing my best to keep everybody happy. My wife, my son, myself, and of course, all of you. So, thank you all very much for watching. And as always, see you again next time. And a huge thank you to my Patreon providers and my Subscribe Star subscribers. Without you, this truly wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to support my channel but don't want to join either of those, I completely understand. But you could still help by using my affiliate links in the description below, and or like, share, and subscribe as always. Again, thank you very much.